My name's Anna Kilpack, and I'm the Executive Director for NAMI Southwest Iowa. So for those that aren't familiar, if you're not familiar with NAMI, we are the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we provide support groups, educational classes, presentations, things like this to try to break down stigma and open up conversations. And we serve 9 counties in Southwest Iowa. So I'm not sure where you're located, but we go basically from Monona County up north to Page and Fremont counties down south, and then over to Cass County. So that all encompasses like Potawatomi County. So we've been around since about 2018, and about a year and a half ago, we started this C.A.R.E.S series, and C.A.R.E.S is an acronym for Community Advocacy, Resources, Education, and Support. And we really wanted this to be just all different topics about anything mental health or disability related, and provide a way to have casual conversations and open up and normalize the conversation about mental illness. So that's really what this is about. So each month we have a different topic. We started off doing these in person, and then we switched to a virtual format just so that everybody throughout the 9 counties can access the information. We also record these meetings, so just be aware we do record it and then put it on our website. Feel free to turn your camera off if you don't want to show yourself on the recording, but we'll also have some time for questions and answers once our panel gets done talking tonight. So I've got another person to let in. So anyway, tonight we have a panel of 3 individuals from NAMI Southwest Iowa, and they're going to talk about 988. Just to give you a little bit of intro to 988, 988 is the new crisis line for mental illness, mental health crisis, and wellness. And it started in July 16th, I believe. I'll let the experts talk about it here in a second. But started in July, and NAMI's been a really big proponent of 988 and has helped advocate for it and to get this started. And there's a lot of confusion about it. So I personally had a lot of questions, and there's been a lot of talk about what it is and what it isn't. So hopefully Aaliyah, Lisa, and Devin can help clarify some of this for us tonight. They've got a little presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to you ladies.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. I'm having trouble sharing my screen.
Yep, let me make you co-host.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So I'm Devin, and I am going to be kind of starting this off. I'm program director, one of the program directors. So 988 is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is now 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, which was formerly known as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. After years of advocacy and preparation, it's now active as of July 16th, Anna was correct, across the United States, which is the new shorter version to make it easier for people to remember. I can't see all of that, but that's all right. The previous number will continue to function indefinitely. Is that it? Okay, what happens when you call 988? So first you're going to hear an automated message featuring additional options while you are connected to a skilled trained crisis worker. A trained crisis worker at your local center will answer the phone. This person will listen to you, understand how your problem is affecting you, provide support, and get you the help that you need. Calls coming from An Iowa area code will get rerouted to one of two crisis centers in Iowa, the Foundation 2 Crisis Center in Cedar Rapids and Community located in Iowa City. What is a crisis center? Crisis center is a resource for individuals going through mental health crises. They provide mental health services and emotional support for their state or local communities. Most crisis centers are nonprofit and many utilize trained volunteers as well as mental health professionals. Your local crisis centers usually serves your entire community, often 24/7 free of charge. And these centers connect callers to providers in their community that can support their needs. The crisis centers answer calls for the lifeline, as well as local helplines, and offer resources such as text, chat, or mobile services. Crisis centers also provide training and educational resources on suicide prevention and mental wellness. They're also a resource for mental health professionals seeking advice on best practices. All of the services a crisis center offers strengthens their local community and the state as a whole. Why crisis centers need your help? Well, they're supporting the lifeline. So the lifeline, the 988 is made up of an expansive network of over 200 local and state-funded crisis centers located across the United States. The counselors at these local crisis centers answer calls and chats from people in distress that the lifeline receives every day. The Lifeline's crisis centers provide the specialized care of a local community with the support of a national network. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is independently evaluated by a federally funded I can't see it on that. I don't know how to get that out of there. Oh, I went off the wrong thing. You just go to the next one, please, Aaliyah. I lost in my notes. How is 988 different from 911? The Lifeline does not currently have the capability to directly geolocate callers. Don't know, I can't see that word, and users in the same way that 911 providers do. The Lifeline does attempt to route callers to the nearest center to them in the network using their area code to determine the most proximal center. The FCC is the governing body that determines geolocation capabilities. And they do have the, for the hearing impaired, by using your preferred relay service or dialing 711 and then 988. Other languages, looks like a Spanish, like, there's a separate number, I'm not sure. I can't see the number, but there's over a whole bunch of different languages that they can interpret. And you can, the Lifeline and Veterans Crisis Line can also be reached by dialing 1-800-SUICIDE, which have been routed through the 988 or through the Lifeline network since 2007. Callers to, yeah, I don't, it's. Sorry, I'm completely lost in my notes and I can't read the rest, the right portion of these slides. And I think there should only be like one more. Other languages. Is the Lifeline service still available in a state or area that does not have a crisis center participating in the 988 Lifeline network? Yes, the Lifeline itself covers all areas of the country, even if there is no local center participating in that area. And it is their goal to have calls answered as locally as possible so that they are, so they're working on developing relationships in areas where there are no crisis centers. And so much more can be found on their website. And I mention there's a chat feature too on the website. If you go to the 988lifeline.org, so you can text 988, you can call 988, and if you go to that website, there is a chat feature at the top right. And most of the information that I was able to pull came from that. So it definitely has a ton of information just if you want to go and you can find out more about how it works, what they're doing, how you can help. There's just a lot of stuff in the works, and there's things that we can do to help push things along, I think. So that would conclude what I have for the 988.
Okay. Hi, my name is Aaliyah Penn. I'm currently a marketing strategist, and I do lots of outreach with NAMI. This summer specifically, I'm working through AmeriCorps as a Vista. So this is like my last big bang before my service is up with NAMI, and it's been a lot of fun and very rewarding to work with these guys. So going off of what we talked about with Devin, 988 is gonna hopefully fill a big gap in the way that mental health is handled in this country, in our country, and in our world right now. Historically and in the past, people experiencing a mental health crisis have ended up dialing 911, and the problem with that is that 911 wasn't designed to handle mental health crises. Those calls ended up in the hands of law enforcement who are not trained for mental health crises, and ended in traumatic and tragic events. There's a few statistics I've gathered. In 2021, 2 million people with serious mental illnesses were booked in jail instead of receiving the resources and support that 988 might have otherwise provided them. And also a quarter of fatal shootings by police officers have resulted in death or have involved people with mental illnesses in the past. So with that being said, 988 is here to reroute those calls that might otherwise end poorly, and put them in the hands of people who are trained professionals and have a open door policy on anything mental health crisis related. Because mental health crisis deserves a mental health response. 988 was designed to be a quick, easy, memorable service for people in crisis, somewhere where you won't get put on hold or your call won't be delayed. this is something that's been in the works for a while now, but especially with the pandemic, mental health has been on the forefront of the nation in general. And post COVID, 4 in 10 adults have reported symptoms of anxiety or depression compared to the 1 in 10 adults that had prior to the pandemic. This same trend is also affecting youth and teenagers. High school students have reported their mental health has suffered since the pandemic, and I think the COVID served as a catalyst for the increased need and necessity of a hotline like 988. So, as I said, the plan for 988 has been something that's been in the works now. COVID was something that kind of fired it up. And for the past 3 years, actually, HHS, the FCC, and the VA have been been working on a joint collaboration under the Biden-Harris administration as part of their mental health comprehensive strategy. In 2020, the National Suicide Hotline Designation Act was proposed and passed by Congress, which pretty much gave the authorization to switch the 10-digit suicide hotline to become a 3-digit number that would then be rolled out as required by all U.S. states and territories in July of this year. So as far as funding is concerned, this is something that is quite up in the air right now because this is such a new thing. Prior to 2020 and the big launch of this new and improved service, the Lifeline was underfunded and lacking resources. And this is the first big surge of funding we've received at a federal level to expand crisis services in the country. So $432 million was invested at the federal level with the hopes of scaling up crisis centers and backup center capacity, as well as upscaling special services like a Spanish language subnetwork. And a quarter of those funds was grant funding set aside specifically to improve response rates, expand capacity to meet future demand, and ensure that the calls are initiated as local as possible. So as of right now, there are currently over 200 state and local crisis centers supported by the HHS across the nation right now. Even with the since 988 has been launched, there's been a huge influx in the volume and capacity of calls being taken, but it has coincided with an increase of successfully answered calls, texts, and chats. So as this becomes more popular, more people are able to reach the services and the support that they need. The goal is to eventually make 988 as expensive and accessible as emergency medical centers are now. So the way 911 operates, we hope to see operate the same in 988. with the correct responses. And that success will depend on us and our collaboration and investment on a federal, state, and local level. So the 2020 Designation Act that was passed also allows states to pass legislation to add a small tax to cell phone bills that would provide a permanent source of funding for 988 and other crisis services, which is the same way that 911 is currently funded right now. As of right now, only 4 states have implemented this sort of legislation, and only a few more have proposed legislation to do the same. But among the mental health professionals across the nation, the outlook is positive because more and more states are recognizing how necessary adequate access to mental health services is becoming. And I think COVID was a big eye-opener for the country. It's projected that the 3.6 million calls made in 2021 will double the first year. So in July of 2023, they're expecting over 7 million calls to the 988 hotline, and that will require resources, support, and further investment. And hopefully with the increased demand, will provide an increased response. So if you're to call 988, I'm sorry, in Iowa right now, your call is going to be directed to one of 2 places. There is Community Crisis Services, which is in Iowa City, and there's Foundation 2, which is in Cedar Rapids. These places also provide continued crisis services. If you don't get in immediate contact with one of these 2 places, your call will still be answered. And it just means that those 2 centers are probably experiencing capacity. However, 80% of calls are just de-escalated virtually, but if they can't be and they need additional support, the counselor can connect the individual in crisis with local resources. And that's what I've got. So I'll turn it over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaliyah and Devin. I appreciate everything you guys had to say, because now I can talk about the history of where we're at. So 911 actually was not just like magically invented. It was a 7-digit phone number in areas where you had to look it up in your phone book to call for an emergency. So in about 1957, they started to develop a general number, which would be 911. It didn't really get in place until AT&T collaborated with them, and they were able to create 911 as more of a solid number in the 1970s. And it was invented for landlines because that's all we had back then. I mean, cell phones were not quite in the thought, I mean, maybe, but in the 80s and 90s, that's when we started to see the cell phones, pagers, then cell phones come alive. So then we started to see where sometimes services have to be pinged off a tower for 911 to be able to find you. And the comparison to 988 is that it is already equipped to be digital. It is also equipped to handle text messages. So it's going to be able to reach a broader community for all of us. 911 dispatches firefighters, paramedics, or police in emergency. It does not dispatch mental health services. Thank you. Next slide, Aaliyah. Well, in our research, we found that that mental health calls are often the most frequent call to 911. And I think all of us could probably attest to situations that have escalated and we know that maybe something needs to happen, but we're not sure who to call, but there's only been 911. It's always been used as a primary responder to situations. There's inconsistent services. When you call 911, I mean, the police that arrive to handle the situation may not know how to best circumvent the situation, and they're not equipped for that. They are trained for very specific things. So that means that individuals, families, and communities are facing avoidable trauma and tragedy this whole time that perhaps they could, if had 988 been in existence prior, they wouldn't have had to face. So this is a huge thing going forward. But it also has 911 has had barriers. I mean, 65 million people in this country face barriers to accessing 911. And we all can kind of probably think of how that is a barrier. I mean, it certainly can affect people's home life, their communities. Maybe they have a physical and mental barrier to calling 911. But we don't want escalation for individuals in crisis, especially those with intersectionality. And the slide on here is just talks about how a reimagined mental health crisis system could look, where we could have different categories of where things can go when you're in crisis. Aaliyah, can you go to the next slide? So 988 is a great first step to helping those in mental health crisis. And we know that there is, for a person to answer these calls, there has to be a high cognitive load to processing and routing an emergency call effectively. So this means these people also need to be trained, perhaps certified, and hopefully they are broadened in their thinking to realize a community scenario when they are answering a call. Those in mental health crisis can call 988 to begin a road to recovery. I mean, when they're placing that call, it's because they need something at that moment. And hopefully we can get them on that path. As Marvin Gaye sang, "Talk to me so you can see what's going on." And that is key. We need to be able to tell our stories. The new crisis line is active to help people and all people. Each state is either in the process or has established the crisis call centers, the mobile crisis outreach, and the co-responders that are required when you place a call. A crisis call center is an integral part of the whole dynamic. They need to be able to work with anyone, anytime, anywhere, ideally meeting people where they are mentally, and that is so important. Next slide, Aaliyah. Okay, so this is just an example. Now, this was in May of this year, and it shows you the states that have things fully up and running, which are in the green, and the states that are still kind of working some things out. Now, Iowa is in the process. We do have something set up for if you do call, but I'm just saying they don't have the full model working at this moment, but each state is working on something. Can you go to the next slide, Aaliyah? Oh, this slide shows you how Oregon state is dealing with it. So you see on the left-hand side, if you call 911, it's a crisis call and where your call gets routed to. And then on the right-hand side, it shows if you call 988 and you're in crises, where the different possibilities you can get routed to. And they have down at the bottom the different options that are available. Of course, the one on the far left is the one that we are avoiding, which is the criminal justice system and the emergency room. Hopefully we can help people out by putting them in resources in their community. Perhaps they need to go to a psychiatric hospital or just to a crisis resource center.
Done that with my mom. Thanks.
Next slide, Aaliyah. Okay, so one thing that we can do is talk about collaboration. And the one thing that I did mention is identifying people who want to work in these crisis response systems. We need to identify core competencies of community behavioral health crisis responders from literature and perspectives of lived experience. These people that are answering the phone calls need to be well skilled. Number two, identify implementation and policy barriers, facilitators, and issues. Number three, identify steps required to develop a recognized professional certification process to facilitate rapid entry and workforce expansion. They're talking about how, 988 is all coming together and they need people they're qualified working in that space. And perhaps they don't have to have years of a degree behind them, that their life experience can be enough to get them the job. Number four, each step will include attention to safety. To identify competencies and policy and implementation elements that enhance safety for all. And on our last slide, it just shows you some resources that you can further your education on 988 if you'd like. We certainly have those available. And that is the history of 911. And as we move forward, 988. Thank you all for coming this evening. We open this up to any questions you might have.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. Lisa and Devin and Aaliyah have worked really hard on this. It's the first time that I've kind of thrown them out there and said, here, take this and run with it, do some research and put together a presentation. So I appreciate all your work on this and all of your research. 988 is something that is very much still in development, but it's also very much active and something that you can access today. Some of the questions that I've heard, and maybe one of you three can chime in on, is if I call 988, are the cops going to come to my house?
No, they will not.
They absolutely won't, or
No. So no, typically that is not. So the statistic is over 98% of the millions of calls made to 988 never require them to contact law enforcement, whereas nearly 100% of calls from 911 forwarded to law enforcement. So it's not a guarantee, because there are those times where that is going to be what is necessary and needed. But 98% don't require the cops to come.
Nice. Okay. Another thing that I've heard, or another question I feel like would be, so if the cops don't come out to your house, if you have someone that's in crisis, first of all, do I have to be in crisis to call, or if my family member's in crisis, can I call for them? How does that work?
From my understanding, as long as you have the history of the individual and what they're going through, you can make that call. And they would patch you through to a call center. After you call 988, they patch you through to a call center. And then from there, they would determine if you need to talk to someone else, or if they can place you in, just talk to that individual over the phone, perhaps.
Okay. So my understanding is that when you call 988, basically it goes to the same place that your call would have gone to if you had called the, what is it called? The suicide lifeline? Is that right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. So it's no different than calling that number. It's just an easier number to remember.
Yes, very much so.
Okay, very good. What have you heard about capacity? As far as one of the concerns that I heard early on is with the release of 988, there'll be a lot more people calling because it's easier to remember. And obviously there's a need out there. What have you heard? Has there been an increase in call volume? Have they been able to handle the capacity?
Devin, you talked to the gentleman from the state. Did he mention anything like that?
So from my understanding, Anna, is still like, so Lisa brought up that showed the map, the chart or map or whatever of the United States and the different colors of where they were at. So I think that each state is going to be, we're all at different, you know, as far as what we can do or can't do in terms of that. And they're actually having a meeting tomorrow to make some kind of a decision as far as capacity, like where they're going to put the dollars from, like what was it, not DHS,
IDPH.
was Eric out of IDPH and DHS,
which
or
is now
DHS,
HHS.
whatever it is called now,
Yeah.
I don't know, but they're making a decision tomorrow. I'm not exactly sure. Lisa might know a little bit about like what exactly that meant. I was trying to navigate like my notes when I spoke with this gentleman and decipher what was going on, or what they were trying to do as far as what is the decision that they are making or have to make
Okay.
for that capacity.
So there's still some work to be done here in Iowa
Mhm.
to increase our capacity and be able to handle the volume of calls. And it sounds like they're still working on that legislatively or within the department to provide the appropriate funding so we can handle the capacity. Is that kind of the gist of it, you think?
Yes, and I think Aaliyah spoke to the fact that your call will be handled, and that even if they are at capacity, it still will get routed somewhere.
Okay, good. It's good to know. So what questions does anybody else have? I don't want to take the whole floor. Those were things that were popping up in my mind as you guys talk, though. And if you're muted, you might have to unmute yourself. I think all of our guests are muted at this point. Okay, well, you guys must have done a really thorough job. I'm not seeing any questions pop up. So one thing that I think is really interesting about all of this is the fear that people still have about calling 988 because of the trauma that's happened from calling 911. There's still that fear that the cops are going to come, or, you know, if in that 2% of calls where someone, you know, the cops do have to come out to the house, you know, what's going to happen? What if I'm in that 2%? You know, what's going to happen? Do you know if in those instances, is that kind of automatically a crisis response team that comes rather than just the police officers?
That again is going to be something that probably varies. We don't I don't think we have that here. That, you know, like a mobile response team to come to the house where they do in Omaha, or
Well,
you know,
actually, Devin, we do have that. We have a mobile crisis response team that's supposed to be available throughout the region. Now, a lot of times the therapists that come, and if for those that don't know what a crisis response team is, it's law enforcement coupled with a mental health professional. And sometimes, a lot of times, I think the mental health professional is via telehealth. So, especially in the more rural areas, like up in Shelby County, where you're at, Devin, I think it would probably be a telehealth provider with law enforcement. Now, whether or not they're utilizing the crisis response teams, I think can vary county to county. And that has a lot to do with the buy-in from law enforcement in that county. So if you're not seeing that happen in your county, it might be a good thing to talk to your local police or sheriff's office and do some advocating for that and let them know how important it is.
Well, and Anna, when looking at like that Oregon model, and I know it was kind of hard to see all those little spaces, but it looks like calling 911 from a 988 call is probably the last resort that they take.
Right.
They really try to work that out within their capacity of the co-responders, the call center, and the mobile crisis unit. So
Good.
hopefully, unless there's it's a physical emergency,
Right.
I would imagine they're not called as often.
Yeah. Good.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm just wondering if there's not even statistics on this part, but when people are calling in to the crisis center, is it seen or known that more often than not, it is not so much about the person ready to commit suicide, but more because they need somebody to talk to? So it's more about the ideation. I just need someone to talk to in the moment, and not so much that, and I think that's part of why 911 is not as involved too, is because the threat is not immediate, but the call is immediate. Are there any statistics on that part of it, of that we're seeing that they just really need a crisis center for someone to talk to? Not necessarily I'm ready to, harm myself, but I just need somebody to talk to. So do you know if these professionals, they're getting trained basically for that, just to answer that type of call and not so much about the suicide itself?
And I'll let the girls who have the stats talk to the statistics, but it seems to me that would be a large portion of it, Amber. There's, even so there's what we call warm lines out there where, people, if they just need to talk to somebody, can call. But sometimes, people do have that suicide ideation where, again, they're not ready to take action, but the thoughts are there, and they just need, someone to talk them through, some distraction techniques or something that, can help them get away from those thoughts. And I think that's probably a very large part of that. And when you're looking at the 98% versus the 2%, probably, and again, I'll let you girls talk to the stats, probably a large portion of because I think I had heard something about there's a percentage that don't require anyone to be dispatched out to the home. And then there's a percentage that requires someone to be dispatched, but only like the crisis response team or something like that, or requires a follow-up check. And then, of course, the percentage that requires a call to 911. Lisa, do you, or Aaliyah, do you have stats on that?
It does seem that overwhelmingly more times than not, most of these calls are likely people who just need somebody to talk to, or rather than they're in a situation that could be dangerous or violent. It's there. They say that 80% of the calls are de-escalated via phone call, text, or chat. And 12%, the remaining 12% might require some further support or resources, maybe the crisis response team. And then there's the 2% that.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's like that 80% that I'm thinking of that, you know, are de-escalated without need for further intervention. And I would imagine a large part of those are individuals like what you're talking about, Amber.
And the professionals that are trained to answer these calls have had 60-hour-long training courses and know how to handle anything from like as small to as wide as what the situation might require.
Other questions?
I was just going to mention, I think there is some follow-up, like when they offer resources for the individual that is calling as well. So there's something that they leave with that they can access as a resource.
So it's not, so from kind of what I'm gathering as I read up on it is that it's, so the first initial step is 988 is replacing the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline hotline number, right? And so they're trying to, it looks like they're trying to move it more broad and not just suicide prevention. This is the new number to contact for mental health, substance abuse, and suicide crisis. You know, like it's more, it's a more broad, from the way that they describe what 988 is. I mean, it's not, it shouldn't be just suicide, I guess.
Well,
Is that, I don't know if anybody else, I mean, as things evolve and they do, like the decision that they're going to make tomorrow within this region, like as far as where they put the money, because they have funds, they have been given funds, and where they're going to put that, and if they're going to put that into 988, or if they're going to put that into, you know, the maybe they're going to put it into the statewide crisis line number or crisis center. I don't know, you know, it's just, I think the goal is to get it to that point where it is, no matter where you're at, where you're calling from, that you get help, and that and then it does act like 911, but not like, so if somebody calls 988 and they go, oh, I changed my mind, click, right? Like if you did that with 911, they're gonna, something's getting dispatched to you right there, right? So no accidental, you know, police showing up. So there's so many differences, and I think that has the potential to evolve into a really amazing resource. There, the article that I read from, was it Sean King?
Yes.
He had talked about, I think he had mentioned not being a person of race, not, you know, wanting to call 911 or something like that, just because of there's so much, you know, and I obviously can't relate because I'm, you know, but apparently that is a huge thing among that race, and not calling 911. So he suggests like that it opens up a lot of doors maybe for for those people. And that might be one of those barriers that you know, that one you two mentioned, was like, just, you know, a certain race is not comfortable, I guess, or doesn't feel like, you know, 911 is what to call, and 988, it can be that now for them. And if it requires, you know, maybe it is at 2% and they do need somebody to come, but at least it's kind of, it's less intimidating, I guess, for certain folks. So.
Well, and that's a good point. One thing that I've heard from some groups is that certain, you know, people of color still, and Aaliyah, I think you were talking about that a little bit, you know, that there's some concern. You want to address that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, just coming from my perspective, pretty in tune with like what's trending, what stigma is currently out there right now. I have seen a lot of, I guess, fear from communities of color, queer folks, other marginalized groups of individuals who are disproportionately affected and harmed by like police involvement in general. And it drives people away from the idea and the notion of 988. But I think that has a lot to do with a lack of information on what 988 actually is and what mental health professionals hope 988 to actually be. And I think just opening the conversation up really expands, you know, how we see it and how we perceive it. And as this, it's only maybe it's only a month old at this point, at this rate. And so the more we see it working in real time, I believe that the less or the more inclined people might be to have more of a positive reaction towards it.
So you brought up a good point too, and I'm not sure if I heard on this, Devin, you were saying that, you know, with like 911, people will call and they hang up. Typically 911 will call you right back. Do you know if 988 is also doing that? Do they have a callback response if someone calls in crisis? Do they call them back to check on them at that point? Or do we know if that is something they're doing as being trained?
I don't think that is what is happening as of current, but I don't know. I mean, I can call 988 and hang up right now and see. I mean, I guess, well, how do you know if you don't? I mean, that just in the conversations I've been having with people the past few weeks about 988 and, you know, professionals and people, you know, that cover this region and stuff, is that question has been asked, like, I kind of want to call and see. I'm like, well, then do, because actually they've taken tons of calls of people just checking, just to see if it works, just to see, you know, whatever. So it's not as, so like, you don't call 911 unless you need to, right? Like, that's kind of not the case here. Like, I think it's okay to call and just check maybe. And I've been tempted to do it for the past 2 weeks, but I haven't yet. So
I wish you would have, then we'd have an answer.
well, do you want me, should I, I'll do it right now. I'll dial 988 and then I hang up and see what happens. I
There you
mean,
go for it.
it's not going to hurt anybody, right?
That's right. It's a great question. While she's doing that, any other questions, thoughts, comments? Okay. Any questions about NAMI in general? or about what we do or what services we have available. Well, I'll share a little bit to let you guys know. We have been expanding our support groups, and we currently have support groups, connection support groups, which are support groups for peers in, and help me remember, ladies, we've got Council Bluffs, Atlantic, starting in September, we're going to have Clarinda, we have Harlan, and then we have a virtual group, and we'll be starting a second virtual group in September. We also have 2 family support groups, one that's virtual and one that is in Clarinda. All of the dates, times, locations are on our website, NAMI Southwest Iowa.com. We also do classes. So like one of the classes we do is the peer-to-peer class, which is an 8-week class for individuals that have a diagnosis, where they can learn all about different mental health diagnoses. So they can learn about their illness. They can learn about the types of medications that are out there and kind of how they work in the brain, you know, what they do, put together their own crisis plan, and learn about communication and how to communicate with someone effectively, and how to, you know, learn a lot about self-care. All right, thank you, Amber. And then we also have a family class called Family to Family that is very similar. It's an 8-week class, and it covers different mental health diagnoses and medication classes, how the brain works and how the medications affect the brain. So it gets into the biology of it, and then goes into communication and how to de-escalate situations, and how to basically help their loved one without placing blame. And then we talk about resources and self-care for family members. So we will have a family to family class starting virtually October 1st. And we have another virtual peer-to-peer class coming up soon. I don't have the exact dates yet, but again, if you watch our website or follow us on Facebook, NAMI Southwest Iowa, you can stay up to date on all that. And we have an email list as well. You can join on our website, where you'll get updates on new programs coming out. So another exciting thing that we have starting up, or in the works, is we've been working with the Veteran Affairs service offices throughout the region, and we're hoping to get some connection and family support groups specifically for veterans and their family members going soon. So keep checking our website, our Facebook. That'll be a little bit longer before that gets going, but it's in the works. So I'm excited about that. Anything else you girls want to add to what we got going on? Okay. Did you get a call back yet, Devin?
No, actually, I don't know if I should share my opinion of what I had to listen to.
Well, this is an honest conversation, so let's hear it.
There was a lot. There was a lot, so much that I hung up before it even, I mean, did you see me with the phone? It was like an automated, like,
Oh,
and it definitely answered it with, you have called the National Suicide, blah, blah, that whole thing. And it was all still being automated when I hung up. So it was quite a bit going on.
that's unfortunate because, yeah, I mean, someone who's in a crisis is already overwhelmed. That's a lot to process. Interesting.
That was
Well,
my
it is
opinion.
a work in progress.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I'm sure it's no different if you call the suicide prevention lifeline, right? You're going to get the same automated.
Yep.
So it's not any different. So it's not that they just recently changed it to that. That's the way it's been. But yeah. Unlike when you call 911, you get a dispatcher right away, right?
Yeah, I think that's set up, like if you were to call it and get disconnected, they send somebody
They'll,
out to your
they'll call back
location.
first, and if they don't get an answer, they'll send someone out.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Well, I want to respect everyone's time. I want to thank you for being here. Looks like Krista, you're still with us. Hi, Krista. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's good to see you. And Devin, Aaliyah, and Lisa, thank you so much for your hard work on this. There's a lot of research, I know, and you did a great job. So thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank
Good
you,
night,
guys.
everyone. Thank you.